I never thought I'd be sitting alone in my Boston brownstone at 65, watching my family fall apart. My name is Margaret Sullivan, and for 4 decades I taught high school English to generations of students in this city. I've witnessed countless family dramas through the pages of literature. But nothing prepared me for becoming the villain in my own son's story. The accusation still burns in my ears. Your mother is our eternal shame. That's what Victoria, my soon-to-be ex-daughter-in-law, spat at my son Michael during their divorce proceedings. Those words drove a wedge between us deeper than I ever imagined possible. But the truth has a way of surfacing, even when buried under layers of deception and $2.7 million dollars. It began on a crisp September morning, the kind where New England shows off its first hints of fall. The maple outside my kitchen window was just beginning to blush red when my phone rang. Michael's name flashed on the screen, an increasingly rare occurrence these 6 months. "Mom," his voice cracked slightly. "Victoria filed for divorce yesterday." My hand gripped the counter. Despite my complicated feelings about their marriage, the finality of those words hit like a physical blow. "Oh, Michael, I'm so sorry. Can you come over? I don't want to be alone right now." Within an hour, I was pulling into the driveway of their Beacon Hill townhouse, the one I'd helped them purchase with a substantial down payment when they married 7 years ago. My retirement savings had taken a hit. But watching Michael and Victoria beaming as they turned the key for the first time had made it worthwhile. The house looked the same as always, tastefully renovated Victorian with window boxes still exploding with late summer blooms that Victoria meticulously maintained. But something was different. The curtains were drawn despite the beautiful day, and Michael's car sat askew in the driveway, one wheel on the immaculate lawn. When Michael opened the door, I barely recognized him. My son, always so put together in pressed shirts and polished shoes, stood before me in a wrinkled t-shirt, eyes red-rimmed and hair uncombed. At 42, the gray at his temples seemed to have multiplied overnight. "She's been having an affair," he said, before I could even cross the threshold. "For over a year, with her business partner." I stepped inside and held my son as he cried for the first time since his father's funeral 12 years ago. The foyer smelled of Victoria's signature lavender candles, the ones she special ordered from a boutique in Provence. How strange that her scent still permeated the house she'd abandoned. After guiding Michael to the kitchen, I made tea while he talked. Rambling, disjointed fragments about missed dinners, suspicious texts, and weekend conferences that suddenly made terrible sense. "I gave her everything, Mom. Everything." He stared at the steaming mug I placed before him. "And now she wants half the house, half of my retirement, half of everything." I chose my words carefully. "You have a prenuptial agreement." "Don't you?" Michael's laugh was hollow. "Victoria's lawyer says it's contestable, something about improper financial disclosure and coercion." He rubbed his face. "And she's saying I've hidden assets, that I've been stealing from her business." "That's absurd," I said too quickly. "Is it?" His eyes met mine, bloodshot but suddenly focused. "Victoria says you've always undermined our marriage, that you convinced me to keep money from her." The accusation hung between us like a physical thing. I reached for my tea to hide the tremor in my hands. "Michael, I've only ever wanted what's best for you." "That's what she said you'd say." He pushed back from the table, chair legs screeching against the hardwood floors. "She told me you've been manipulating me my entire life." I felt my face flush. "And you believe her, after what she's done to you?" I don't know what to believe anymore. He walked to the window, turning his back to me. "Victoria says I need to choose." "Choose what?" "Between you and any chance of reconciliation with her." The room seemed to tilt. She's asking you to cut me out of your life after she betrayed you. She says you poisoned our marriage from the beginning." His voice was frighteningly flat. "That you never approved of her." I bit back my first response. It was true I'd had reservations about Victoria from the start. The way she'd swept into Michael's life like a hurricane after his divorce from Sarah. How quickly she'd convinced him to buy a house beyond his means. Her constant subtle digs at my quaint lifestyle. But I'd kept most of my concerns to myself, hadn't I? "Michael, look at me." I waited until he turned. "I have only ever supported your choices. I gave you half my retirement savings for the down payment on this house because you and Victoria wanted it." His expression hardened. "Victoria says that money came with strings attached, that you've held it over our heads. That's not true, and you know it." The unfairness of it stung. I never asked for anything in return. "Then why did you insist your name be on the deed?" I was momentarily speechless. "For tax purposes. It was your financial advisor's suggestion. Remember? To avoid the gift tax since it was over the exemption limit." Michael shook his head. "Victoria says it was so you could maintain control." "Michael, please." I reached for his hand, but he pulled away. "You're not thinking clearly." "Maybe I'm thinking clearly for the first time," he snapped. "Victoria might have betrayed me, but at least she's being honest about it now. What secrets are you keeping, Mom?" The injustice of it hit me like a physical blow. After everything, the $210,000 I'd given them for the down payment, the weekends I'd spent helping them renovate, the dinners I'd hosted where Victoria barely concealed her disdain for my outdated cooking. This was my reward? Suspicion and accusations? "I think I should go," I said, gathering my purse. "That's right. Walk away when things get difficult." Michael's voice was bitter. "That's what Dad always said you did." I froze, my hand on the strap of my purse. "Your father had no right to say that to you. He told me a lot of things before he died." "About why your marriage was so unhappy?" The old pain surfaced, sharp as ever. Robert and I had tried to shield Michael from our problems, but children always know when things aren't right. Still, I'd never shared the truth about his father's gambling, the second mortgage I'd paid off in secret, the credit card debt I'd discovered only after Robert's heart attack. "We can discuss this another time," I said, finding my teacher's voice, the one that brooked no argument, "when you're less upset." "Victoria was right about you," Michael said, following me to the door. "You can't stand losing control." I turned to face him one last time. "I love you, Michael. When you're ready to talk, really talk, I'll be here." As I drove away, I glimpsed him in the rearview mirror, standing in the doorway of the house I'd helped provide, looking lost. It would be the last time I saw my son for nearly 3 months. The silence was deafening after that day. My calls went unanswered, my texts unread. I learned about the progression of Michael and Victoria's divorce through mutual friends and the occasional social media update. Victoria had moved into a luxury apartment downtown, while Michael remained in the house. They were attempting mediation. Their case had been assigned to Judge Williams in Suffolk County Family Court. October passed in a blur of fallen leaves and increasing isolation. I threw myself into volunteer work at the library and twice-weekly dinners with my sister Ellen, who lived across town. Ellen, 5 years my junior and infinitely more diplomatic, urged patience. "Give him time," she counseled one evening as we shared takeout from our favorite Thai place. "Men in crisis often look for someone to blame. Right now, that's you. But why me?" I pushed rice around my plate. "I've done nothing but support him." Ellen sighed. "Victoria's playing the victim masterfully, Maggie. She cheated, but somehow she's convinced Michael that she was driven to it by circumstances, by you. That's absurd. Is it? Think about it. If Michael believes you're partly responsible, It lets him preserve some good in Victoria. It's easier than accepting that the woman he loved simply betrayed him. I considered this as I sipped my tea. So what do I do? Wait, Ellen said simply, and prepare yourself. This might get worse before it gets better. Ellen's prediction proved prophetic. In mid-November, I received a certified letter from Victoria's attorney requesting all financial records, communications and documentation related to the property at 127 Marlborough Street. They were demanding proof of the gift I'd made for the down payment, claiming I had exercised undue influence over Michael and the property. I called my longtime attorney, Josephine Garcia, immediately. They're fishing, she said after I explained. Victoria's trying to establish that your gift wasn't really a gift. If she can prove you maintained some control over those funds or expected repayment, it could affect the division of assets. But that's ridiculous. I have the gift letter we signed. Good. We'll need that and any other documentation showing your intent. Josephine's voice was reassuring. Margaret, has something specific happened to trigger this? I hesitated. Michael and I had an argument. Victoria's convinced him I've been manipulating him. I see. Josephine was quiet for a moment. Margaret, I need to ask you directly. Is there anything about that financial gift that could be misconstrued? Any side agreements or expectations of repayment? Absolutely not, I said firmly. It was a gift, plain and simple. The only reason my name is on the deed is because the financial advisor suggested it to avoid the gift tax. That's what I needed to hear. The clicking of a keyboard came through the phone. I'll respond to this request and gather the necessary documentation. Try not to worry. But worry I did. That night I pulled out the fireproof box where I kept important documents and spread them across my dining table. The gift letter was there, along with bank statements showing the wire transfer of $210,000 to the closing attorney's escrow account. I had emails from Michael's financial advisor explaining the tax implications and suggesting I remain on the deed until enough time had passed to avoid gift tax issues. Everything seemed in order. As I was returning the papers to the box, a folder caught my eye, one I hadn't opened in years. Inside were documents from my divorce from Robert, finalized just 2 years before his death. I'd left most of our marital assets to him, taking only my teacher's pension and our modest savings. At the time, it had seemed the right thing to do. Robert had been diagnosed with early-stage heart disease, and I didn't want to leave him without resources. What I'd never told Michael was that I'd discovered Robert's gambling debts only after our divorce, $176,000 owed to various casinos and loan sharks. I'd paid them off secretly, not wanting to tarnish Michael's image of his father. The money for Michael and Victoria's down payment had come from the sale of my parents' house in Sudbury after their deaths. I'd split the proceeds with Ellen, using most of my share to help Michael. Had I made a mistake by keeping Robert's problems a secret? I wondered now, staring at the divorce decree. If Michael knew the truth about his father, would he be so quick to believe Victoria's accusations about me? I was still contemplating this when my phone chimed with a text. To my surprise, it was from Michael. Need to pick up some documents from your house tomorrow. We'll be by around 10. No greeting, no acknowledgement of our estrangement. Just a terse announcement of his plans. I texted back a simple, "Okay," my heart racing despite the coldness of the exchange. Sleep eluded me that night. I kept imagining different versions of our coming encounter. Michael contrite and seeking reconciliation. Michael hostile and accusatory. Michael professional and distant, treating me like a stranger. By morning, I'd worked myself into such a state that I changed outfits 3 times before settling on a simple sweater and slacks. At precisely 10 a.m., the doorbell rang. I took a deep breath, smoothed my hair, and opened the door. Michael stood on the porch, looking thinner than when I'd last seen him. He wore a charcoal suit that hung slightly loose on his frame, his wedding ring conspicuously absent. "May I come in?" he asked formally. I stepped aside wordlessly. He entered the house he'd grown up in like a cautious guest, hovering in the foyer rather than proceeding to the living room as he normally would. "I need Dad's old tax returns," he said, breaking the awkward silence. "From 2010 to 2013. "They're in the storage boxes in the basement," I replied, matching his businesslike tone. "I can get them for you." "I'll come with you." His tone suggested he didn't trust me to retrieve them accurately. We descended to the basement in uncomfortable silence. The space was meticulously organized, labeled boxes stacked on metal shelving units, each containing neatly filed folders. Robert had always teased me about my librarian tendencies, but in moments like this, I was grateful for my own fastidiousness. "These should be the ones," I said, pulling down 3 banker's boxes marked Taxes 2009 to 2015. Michael took them from me without comment and set them on the folding table I kept for sorting purposes. He began methodically examining each folder, removing the ones he needed and placing them in his briefcase. I watched him work, my heart aching at the distance between us. This young man who now treated me like a hostile witness was the same child I'd nursed through chickenpox, the teenager I'd taught to drive, the young man whose college graduation had been one of the proudest days of my life. "Michael," I ventured finally, "how are you doing?" His hands stilled momentarily, as well as can be expected. "The house looks good," I offered. "The fall colors suit it." Michael closed his briefcase with a snap. "Let's not do this, Mom. Let's not pretend everything's normal." "I'm not pretending anything," I replied, stung. "I'm concerned about you." "Are you?" His eyes met mine for the first time. "Or are you concerned about what happens to your investment in my house?" I recoiled as if he'd slapped me. "Is that what you think of me? That I only care about money?" I don't know what to think anymore. He picked up his briefcase. "Victoria's lawyer found something interesting, you know. The deed lists you as having right of first refusal if we ever sell the house. Did you think I wouldn't find out?" My mind raced. The right of first refusal had been included on the advice of Michael's own financial advisor, a standard provision when a parent co-owns property with a child, meant to keep the house in the family if they decided to sell. I'd forgotten it was even there. "That was your financial advisor's suggestion," I said carefully. "To protect both of us. You agreed to it at the time." "Did I? Or did I just sign what was put in front of me because I trusted you?" Michael's voice was bitter. "Victoria says you've always tried to control my life, that you hated her because she helped me become independent from you." The injustice of it made me tremble. "If I wanted to control you, why would I give you $210,000 with no strings attached? Do you know where that money came from, Michael?" "It was from the sale of Grandma and Grandpa's house, my inheritance. I split it with Ellen and gave most of my share to you." "With your name on the deed," he countered. "To avoid gift tax. You know that." "Do I? Or is that just what you told me?" He glanced at his watch. "I need to go. I have a meeting with my lawyer." As he turned to leave, something in me snapped. Decades of careful restraint, of protecting Michael from painful truths, crumbled in an instant. "Ask your lawyer about this then," I called after him. "Ask about the $176,000 in gambling debts your father left behind that I paid off after his death. Ask about the second mortgage on this house that I discovered only after he died, the one I'm still paying off. Ask why I never told you any of this before." Michael froze on the stairs, his back to me. "What are you talking about?" "Your father had problems, Michael. Problems I protected you from. I didn't want you to think less of him, so I handled it quietly. Paid his debts, kept his secrets." He turned slowly. "You're making this up. Dad would never—" "Look in the box marked Robert, personal," I interrupted. pointing to a container on the bottom shelf. "Third folder from the front. You'll find the loan documentation, the collection notices, everything." For a moment, Michael hesitated. Then, setting down his briefcase, he knelt and pulled out the indicated box. His hands weren't quite steady as he opened it and found the folder I'd mentioned. I watched silently as he paged through the documents. The increasingly threatening letters from Caesar's Palace and Mohegan Sun, the loan agreements with exorbitant interest rates, the second mortgage taken out on our family home without my knowledge or consent. "I don't understand," he said finally. He said, his voice small. "Why didn't you tell me?" "Because he was your father and you loved him." I sat on the bottom step, suddenly exhausted. "He made mistakes, but he loved you. I didn't want that tainted." "So you just paid everything? Handled it all yourself?" I nodded. "It's what mothers do. Michael, we protect our children even when it costs us." He looked at me with new eyes, confusion replacing hostility. "But the money for the house, if Dad left all these debts, came from selling your grandparents' home in Sudbury," I repeated gently. "I wanted you and Victoria to have a good start. A secure home." Michael sat heavily on the concrete floor, still clutching the folder of his father's secrets. "Victoria says," he began, then stopped. "What does Victoria say?" I prompted when he didn't continue. "That you've never respected her. That you've always treated her like she wasn't good enough for me." I chose my next words with extreme care. "I have always wanted you to be happy, Michael. If I seemed reserved with Victoria, it wasn't because I thought she wasn't good enough. It was because I worried she didn't appreciate how good you are." He looked up sharply. "What does that mean?" I sighed. "It means I watched how she treated you, how she spoke to you in front of others, how she dismissed your opinions. It reminded me of—" I hesitated. "Of how Dad treated you," Michael finished quietly. "Yes," I admitted. "But I kept those thoughts to myself because you chose her. And I respected your choice." A long silence stretched between us, filled with the hum of the furnace and distant traffic sounds filtering from the street above. "I need time to process this," Michael said finally, returning the folder to its box, "to figure out what's true." "I understand." I rose from the step, my knees protesting. "Take whatever documents you need." He gathered his briefcase and the tax returns he'd come for. At the top of the stairs he paused. "Mom, thank you for showing me those papers. It wasn't forgiveness or reconciliation, but it was something, a crack in the wall between us." "You're welcome, Michael. I'm here when you're ready to talk." After he left, I sat alone in my kitchen, hands wrapped around a mug of cooling tea. For the first time since this ordeal began, I felt a flicker of hope. The truth was out now, at least part of it. And truth, painful as it might be, was the only foundation on which we could rebuild. I didn't hear from Michael for another week. When he finally called, his voice was guarded but not hostile. "I've been going through Dad's old papers," he said without preamble. "I found more evidence of his gambling, bank withdrawals, cash advances on credit cards. It goes back further than I realized." "Yes," I said simply. "It started when you were in high school. Why didn't you leave him sooner?" The question caught me off guard. "It's complicated, Michael. I loved him despite his flaws, and I worried about how a divorce would affect you. So you stayed unhappy for my sake?" He sounded troubled by this thought. "I made my choices," I said carefully. "Some were right, some were wrong, but they were mine." "Victoria's lawyer is pressing for financial discovery," Michael continued after a pause. "They want statements from all your accounts going back 10 years. They're trying to prove you've been hiding assets." I felt a flutter of anxiety. "I have nothing to hide, but that seems excessive." "I thought so too, which is why—" He hesitated. "I hired a forensic accountant of my own to look at Victoria's business accounts. This was unexpected. What did they find? Discrepancies, large withdrawals coinciding with her business trips, money moving between accounts in ways that don't make sense. His voice hardened slightly. I think she and her business partner have been planning this for a while. Siphoning money, setting up accounts I didn't know about. I bit back my initial response, which would have been uncharitable toward Victoria. Instead, I asked, "What does your lawyer say?" "That this changes everything. If Victoria's been hiding assets while accusing me of doing the same." He trailed off. "There's a hearing next week. I'd like you to be there." My heart leapt, but I kept my voice measured. "Of course. Just tell me when and where." The Suffolk County Family Court was an imposing granite building in downtown Boston, its interiors all polished wood and hushed voices. I arrived early, dressed in a conservative navy suit that had served me well during parent-teacher conferences over the years. Michael met me in the lobby, accompanied by a sharp-looking woman in her 50s, whom he introduced as his attorney, Beverly Winters. "Miss Sullivan," Beverly shook my hand firmly. "I've heard a lot about you. Thank you for coming today." "Will I need to testify?" I asked nervously. "Possibly," Beverly replied. "But first, we have a disclosure hearing. Victoria's side has to present their findings about your financial gift to Michael, and we'll present our findings about Victoria's business dealings." We proceeded to a small conference room where Victoria was already seated with her attorney, a sleek man in an expensive suit who introduced himself as Richard Templeton. Victoria herself barely acknowledged my presence, giving me only the briefest of nods before returning her attention to her phone. I studied her surreptitiously. At 38, Victoria remained strikingly beautiful. Glossy dark hair cut in a sharp bob, impeccable makeup, a figure maintained by thrice-weekly sessions with a personal trainer. Today, she wore a cream-colored suit that probably cost more than a month of my pension. But there was something brittle about her elegance now, a tightness around her eyes that hadn't been there before. Judge Williams entered, a no-nonsense black woman in her 60s who immediately established control of the room. "This is an informal hearing to address financial disclosures in the matter of Sullivan versus Sullivan," she stated, adjusting her glasses. "Mr. Templeton, I understand your client has concerns about funds provided by the respondent's mother?" "Yes, Your Honor." Templeton rose smoothly. "We have evidence suggesting that Ms. Margaret Sullivan's financial contribution to the marital home was not, in fact, a gift, but rather an investment she maintained control over. Furthermore, we believe there may be additional undisclosed assets." I stiffened, but Beverly patted my arm reassuringly. "And what evidence do you have of this?" Judge Williams asked. Templeton presented a series of documents, the deed showing my name, emails between Michael and his financial advisor discussing the arrangement, bank statements showing the transfer. "As you can see, Your Honor, Miss Sullivan maintained a legal interest in the property. Furthermore, the timing of the transfer, just 3 months after Mr. Sullivan received a significant bonus from his employer, suggests an attempt to shield assets." "That's absurd," I whispered to Beverly, who again signaled me to remain quiet. Judge Williams reviewed the documents carefully. "Miss Winters, your response?" Beverly stood. "Your Honor, there's a simple explanation for Ms. Sullivan's name on the deed. It was recommended by the financial advisor to avoid gift tax issues, as the amount exceeded the annual exclusion. We have documentation to this effect." She presented our own set of papers. Furthermore, the timing had nothing to do with Michael's bonus, but rather coincided with the sale of Miss Sullivan's parents' home, which was the source of the funds. The judge nodded thoughtfully. "Mr. Templeton, do you have evidence of any repayment arrangements or other conditions placed on these funds?" "Not explicitly, Your Honor, but the right of first refusal clause clearly indicates Miss Sullivan's intent to maintain control over the property." "That's a standard clause in family property transfers," Beverly countered. It doesn't imply repayment or control, merely a desire to keep the property in the family if it's ever sold. Judge Williams turned to me directly. Miss Sullivan, did you expect repayment of these funds? I stood, my heart pounding. No, Your Honor. It was a gift to my son and his wife. I wanted them to have a good home. And the reason for your name on the deed? Tax purposes only, as Ms. Winters explained. The financial advisor suggested it. Judge Williams nodded. I see no evidence here that the funds were anything other than a gift, albeit one structured to minimize tax implications. Mr. Templeton, unless you have additional evidence, I'm inclined to rule that these funds were indeed a gift to the marital estate. Victoria whispered something urgent to her lawyer, who cleared his throat. Your Honor, we have one more witness who can speak to Ms. Sullivan's intentions. He turned to the door. Mr. Sullivan has joined us today. My breath caught as the door opened and Robert's younger brother George entered the room. I hadn't seen him since Robert's funeral. Our relationship had always been strained at best. George took the seat indicated and was sworn in. Templeton wasted no time. Mr. Sullivan, can you describe your understanding of Margaret Sullivan's financial contribution to your nephew's home? George glanced at me briefly before answering. Maggie always kept a tight hold on the family finances. My brother used to say she counted every penny twice. The idea that she would give away over $200,000 with no strings attached. He shook his head. That doesn't sound like the Maggie I know. I felt my face flush with anger, but Beverly squeezed my arm in warning. Did Miss Sullivan ever discuss this financial gift with you directly? Templeton continued. Not in so many words, but at a family gathering shortly after Michael and Victoria bought the house, she mentioned that she'd invested in their future. Her word, invested. Objection, Beverly interrupted. Hearsay based on casual conversation at a social event taken out of context. Sustained, Judge Williams agreed. Mr. Sullivan, do you have any direct evidence regarding Ms. Sullivan's intentions with this money? George shifted uncomfortably. No, Your Honor. Just what I observed over the years. Thank you, Mr. Sullivan. You're excused. Judge Williams made a note on her pad. Now, Miss Winters, I understand you have some financial concerns of your own to present. Beverly stood. Yes, Your Honor. We've conducted a forensic accounting of Victoria Sullivan's business accounts, and we found evidence of significant financial impropriety. She proceeded to present a detailed analysis showing how Victoria and her business partner, a man named James Cooper, had systematically transferred funds from their interior design firm to personal accounts. Bank statements, check images, and wire transfer records painted a damning picture. Furthermore, Beverly continued, we've discovered that Miss Sullivan and Mr. Cooper purchased a condominium in Provincetown last year without Mr. Sullivan's knowledge, using funds from their business. Victoria's composure finally cracked. That property is a business investment, she interjected. Miss Sullivan, please speak through your counsel, Judge Williams admonished. Templeton leaned close to Victoria, whispering urgently. After a moment, he addressed the court. Your Honor, my client maintains that all business expenditures were legitimate. However, in light of this new information, we would like to request a recess to review these documents. Judge Williams considered this. I'll grant a 30-minute recess. When we reconvene, I expect both parties to be prepared to address all financial matters fully and honestly. As the court emptied, Michael turned to me in the hallway. Did you know Uncle George would be here? I shook my head. I haven't spoken to him in years, not since your father's funeral. He and Dad were never close, Michael said thoughtfully. I wonder why Victoria's lawyer called him. Because they're desperate, Beverly interjected, joining us. They hoped he'd have dirt on your mother. It backfired spectacularly. She smiled thinly. Our financial evidence is much stronger than their character assassination attempts. When we reconvened, the mood had shifted dramatically. Victoria sat rigid beside her lawyer, who addressed the court with noticeably less confidence. Your Honor, after reviewing the financial evidence, my client would like to revise her position. She acknowledges that certain business transactions were not properly disclosed to her husband. However, she maintains that the property in Provincetown was intended as a legitimate business investment for client retreats. A business investment she made with her lover using marital funds, Beverly responded sharply. Without her husband's knowledge or consent. Judge Williams raised a hand. I've seen enough. Based on the evidence presented, I find that Miss Margaret Sullivan's financial contribution to the marital home was indeed a gift to both parties, albeit structured to minimize tax implications. I further find that Victoria Sullivan has improperly shielded marital assets and made significant undisclosed purchases. This will be taken into account in the final division of property. She fixed Victoria with a stern look. Miss Sullivan, hiding assets is a serious matter. Had your husband not discovered these accounts, you would have effectively defrauded both him and this court. I strongly suggest you provide full financial disclosure immediately, or you may face additional sanctions. Victoria's face had gone pale beneath her makeup. She nodded stiffly. Outside the courthouse, Michael seemed dazed by the sudden turn of events. I can't believe she bought property with him, he said as we walked to the parking garage. A house in Provincetown. They must have been planning this for years. I'm so sorry, Michael, I said gently. He shook his head. The thing is, I'm not even angry anymore. Just relieved to know the truth. We reached my car first. Michael hesitated, then asked, Would you like to get lunch? There's more I need to tell you. Over bowls of clam chowder at a nearby restaurant, Michael filled in the gaps in the story. After our confrontation in my basement, he'd begun investigating Victoria's accusations more critically. He'd spoken with their financial advisor, who confirmed that adding my name to the deed had been his recommendation, not my demand. He'd reviewed old emails and text messages, finding a pattern of Victoria subtly turning him against me over years. She'd say things like, Your mother seemed upset when we chose the blue paint instead of the green she suggested, Michael explained. Or I noticed your mom checking the price tag on my new purse. Little comments that made you seem judgmental and controlling. Why would she do that, I wondered. Michael stirred his chowder thoughtfully. I think she saw you as a threat. You knew me too well, could see through her in ways I couldn't. He met my eyes. And you had financial influence. The gift for the house gave you a connection she couldn't break. I never meant it that way. I know that now. He reached across the table and covered my hand with his. Mom, I'm sorry I believed her, that I said those terrible things to you. Tears pricked behind my eyes. You were hurting. She took advantage of that. Still, I should have known better. His grip tightened. There's something else you should know. When I confronted Victoria with what I'd found, do you know what she said? I shook my head. She said, Your mother is our eternal shame. She's the reason we failed. Michael's laugh was without humor. Even then, she was trying to blame you. But this time, I saw through it. Those words, the same ones that had driven us apart, now somehow brought us closer. I squeezed Michael's hand in return. What happens now? I asked. The divorce proceeds, but on very different terms, Michael replied. My lawyer thinks Victoria will settle quickly to avoid further scrutiny of her finances. As for the house, he hesitated. I don't think I want to keep it. Too many memories. Whatever you decide, I'll support you. I know you will. His smile was tentative, but real. You always have. The final divorce settlement came through in early February, just as Boston was digging out from a major blizzard. Victoria agreed to a division that heavily favored Michael, forfeiting any claim to the house and paying him a substantial sum from the hidden accounts. Michael sold the townhouse in March. I didn't exercise my right of first refusal. Instead, I signed papers removing my name from the deed entirely. He used the proceeds to purchase a smaller condo in Cambridge, closer to the technology firm where he worked. We began rebuilding our relationship slowly. Sunday dinners, occasional movies, phone calls that grew less awkward with time. I never pressed for details about the final interactions with Victoria, and Michael offered little beyond mentioning that she and James Cooper had relocated to Chicago to start a new design firm. On a warm evening in June, Michael brought over takeout from our favorite Chinese restaurant. As we sat on my back porch watching fireflies rise from the garden, he broached a subject we'd both avoided. "I found some of Dad's journals while I was packing," he said, setting down his chopsticks. "He wrote about his gambling, about the debts. He knew you were covering for him." I nodded, not trusting myself to speak. "He wrote that he didn't deserve you, that he was ashamed of how he'd treated you, but couldn't seem to stop himself." Michael looked at me directly. "He loved you, Mom, despite everything." "I know he did," I said softly. "In his way." "Victoria reminded me of him sometimes," Michael admitted. "The charm, the big gestures, the way they could make you feel like the most important person in the world, and then cut you down just as quickly. We often repeat patterns," I said, "until we recognize them." "I'm in therapy now," he said with a small smile. "Learning to recognize a lot of things. I'm proud of you for that." Michael reached into his pocket and pulled out a small velvet box. "I wanted you to have this. It was Grandma's." Inside was a delicate gold bracelet set with small sapphires, my mother's favorite piece of jewelry, one I'd admired since childhood. "Michael, this is too much. You should keep it for someday when I have a family again." He shook his head. "Maybe, but right now I want you to have it. A small repayment for everything you've given me." "You don't need to repay me," I protested. "That's not how this works." "I know." He helped clasp the bracelet around my wrist. "But I want to. Not out of obligation, but gratitude." As the sun set over Boston, casting long shadows across my small backyard, I felt a sense of peace that had eluded me for months. The bracelet caught the fading light, sending blue sparkles dancing across the porch. "Victoria was wrong, you know," Michael said quietly. "You're not our shame. You're my strength. Always have been." In that moment, I understood that while some wounds never fully heal, like the pain of Robert's betrayal or Michael's temporary estrangement, they can transform into something else: wisdom, resilience, a deeper appreciation for truth and loyalty. At 65, sitting beside my son as fireflies illuminated the gathering dusk, I realized that family isn't just about blood or marriage certificates. It's about who stands beside you when the truth comes to light, who helps you carry your burdens when they're too heavy to bear alone, who sees your sacrifices and honors them, not with blind gratitude, but with the simple acknowledgement that love, real love, costs something of ourselves. And sometimes, if we're very fortunate, what we receive in return is worth every penny. If you like this story, please like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share your impressions of this story in the comments. To listen to the next story, click on the box on the left.